Setting up a biped character model has so many like moments of duality. It seems simple, but is actually complex. It takes a long time, but it's really just a lot of simple steps done one right after another after another. I thought we could set up a simple biped character together, and I'll break this down into a variety of different steps so that way we can take this in bite-sized pieces. The first step we've got to complete is to just set up our scene so that it makes developing this biped character more manageable. Here we go. I'm going to bounce back and forth quite a bit between my single view and my quad view. So I'll be using Control-Alt-Q or Command-Alt-Q quite a lot. So if you see me flipping back and forth between these two views, a quick reminder that it is Command-Alt-Q or Control-Alt-Q to get that swap done. Let's go ahead and get our scene prepared with some reference images. Now, I've given a collection of reference images to use for this. Download those from Canvas, and we're going to place those in our scene as background or image references. Last time I showed you how to add those by adding a new a new image reference. So we can do it that way, or if you have your files available, we can simply drag them from the character mesh source and simply drag those into our various quadrants. So I'm going to start by dragging in my character top mesh from just the file browser into the top orthographic view. I can then grab character mesh side and drag it to the right orthographic view. Oops, sorry about that. Let's grab mesh top, and that goes in there, and then click on character mesh side, goes into our right orthographic viewport. Let's try this one more time. What is going on here? There we go. Looks like it was trying to replace it, so deselecting it got that job done. And we're just going to move these into position, and then character mesh front, dropping it there, and getting these just moved into position. Not bad, not bad. Now, something we need to do in order to make this whole process work well is make sure that our images are to scale with one another. We can do that by creating a common primitive that can be viewed from all three of the views and used as a moment or a method of scaling. So in this case, it is the head of our biped. So I'll go ahead and add a mesh UV sphere, and I will simply scale this down so that is the size of the head object in our reference image. And press the dot key on my numpad to zoom in on that, and we'll scale it down a little. Maybe see if wireframe works pretty well for this, and just get it reasonably to scale with our reference. Now, it doesn't have to be like pixel perfect. You can see this one's a little bit thinner, but take a moment and try and get it what I call as good as possible. And I did it in the front view first, but you can notice that in my other views my tracing images are not aligned at all. So I want to use this the head object that I made as a means and method of getting it these other images in the right spot. So let's maybe switch back to our view. Let's see, in our viewport shading, our solid mode view. And then we're going to move the reference image to match where the head is in the other views. And this is going to synchronize those views in a way that allows us to depend on them as tracing images for other angles. Now, in this view, we can see that my head is a little bit chunky, so I can scale it there. And in this view, we can see that my head is still slightly too big, maybe too small, and my segments might not be totally correct. So we want to make sure that our segments are proper there, and we can do that by accessing a edit menu. But we can only access that menu once we've, like the moment that we've created the sphere. So I've got it pretty close. I'm going to delete this sphere and create a new one real quick just to make sure that I have the right number of segments. So I just added a new sphere, and you can see that under the Add UV sphere I've got location, segments, rings. Because I want to make sure that my head object has the right number of subdivisions, I'm just going to create a new one there, and then I'll scale this guy down real quick. And oops, let me make sure it's a bit fussy there. Stepping back to the moment of creation, so I've created this UV sphere. Let's add that there. Oops, step forward. And you have to make your changes like pretty much at the moment of creation. So sometimes there's a little add modifier box or a modifier box. If that's not there and we've missed it, then we have to recreate this. So add mesh UV sphere, and you can see where it says add UV sphere and then it has some options. We have to make those adjustments pretty much the moment that we create this thing, which is, in my opinion, a little bit of a drawback for Blender. I like having these segments and rings available later on, but it just doesn't really give you those controls outside of that moment of creation. So at any rate, let's go ahead and change our segments, and it looks like I want, let's say 8 segments. That matches my reference pretty well, right? And then on the rings, I believe I need 5, and it looks pretty good. All right, so now we can minimize that, and now we can commit to moving this head object into the right position. Move it down and move it to the left. And then note that the top tracing image doesn't quite line up right now, so we want to scale that top tracing image down just slightly. And so that way it matches as close as possible. I would say it doesn't have to be perfect, but while you're at it, you might as well try and get it as perfect as you can. Just because the closer that this is to being identical, each of these views, the more accuracy you're going to have for your modeling process later on. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Now, there's a few things that we can do before we get out of the kind of the setup stage that'll help us do even better work down the road. First, I want to save this. So File, Save As. I'm just going to save this into my 3D modeling folder, and I'll call this Biped. Blender's pretty stable, but you never know when it's going to crash. And you don't want to lose any of this work, since this is probably going to be a more time-consuming process. Saving frequently is good practice. 2, we want to name our tracing images, so that way we can tell what they are. So I'll do this ref-top for reference top. I'll do select the next empty, and I'll do ref-side. And then the last one will be ref-front. And to get these renamed, I'm simply double-clicking quickly on the object, and it just brings up the renaming dialog. So that's looking pretty good. Last is I may move these in my 3D user perspective viewport just a tad, so that way they're not disrupting my modeling process. And I'm just moving them. I'm not scaling them, so I'm kind of moving them in a way that almost just allows me to see my model while still having them there. Last, we may want to turn off our tracing images on our renders, so we can go up to our object chooser up in the top right and click on the camera icons. That'll make sure that when we hit render, we're not seeing those tracing images in our renders. And then the last final thing is I may select all of these, and I may go into my filter settings, click for selection filter, and then I may want to turn them off. So that way, when I'm grabbing things, I'm not accidentally selecting my tracing images. And then if you prefer, there's one more step that we can take. If you prefer, we can make our images a little bit transparent, translucent. Now this is going to be personal preference, but I'll show you how to do that. So we have to do this separately. So with any of our references selected, side, front, top, we can go down to the Image tab in our Properties panel and find the field called Opacity. Click it, and then you can simply drag down the opacity of that working image. And I'm gonna go with something like a 0.25. Feels pretty good to me. Just get that clean. And having it numerically entered rather, instead of just kind of sliding, it's a bit of maybe just a preference of mine. Let's go to the top, just so that way I can have them all at the same transparency or opacity. Last one, let's go to the side, add opacity as a property, 0.25, and there we go. So we are pretty well ready to model our biped. We've got our tracing images up, we've got our tracing images scaled, synchronized for scale, and we're pretty well ready to go.